Hydrogen as an energy source for long-haul trucking. It'll take trucks places batteries can only dream of today. Renewable sources of hydrogen promise carbon-free, zero-emissions energy for trucking. The Inflation Reduction Act is poised to kickstart hydrogen production here in the U.S., and the hydrogen sector can't wait to get its collective shovels in the ground. We're on the cusp of a new era of truly clean, green trucking. Or are we? Is hydrogen really as clean and green as we're led to believe? Can we produce enough of the stuff to meet our needs? And how much will it all cost? Answers to these questions and more are coming up in this episode of HDT Talks Trucking. I'm HDT Equipment Editor Jim Park. Using hydrogen to power heavy trucks can be characterized as a good news, bad news story. At face value, hydrogen fuel cells offer about double the range we can currently get from reasonably sized batteries. Refueling times are comparable to that of diesel trucks, and using hydrogen in an internal combustion engine offers fuel efficiency comparable to that of diesel. It's relatively easy for the OEMs to integrate hydrogen ICEs into existing chassis, but let's not forget that hydrogen ICEs will still need aftertreatment systems because they produce NOx. And that's about where the good news stops. Hydrogen also has downsides that we hardly ever talk about. My guest, Dr. David Cebon, isn't shy about discussing the darker side of this highly touted wonder fuel. He's a professor of mechanical engineering at Cambridge University in England and a fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering. He's also the director of the Cambridge Vehicle Dynamics Consortium and the Center for Heavy Sustainable Road Freight. He leads Cambridge University's Engineering Department's Transport Research Group. He says there are several inherent problems with hydrogen. Each one could technically be a deal breaker.
Well, so I should start off by saying that I've mainly been looking at the UK and Europe. And I think we're slightly different to the US, not completely, but slightly different to the US here. And in the context of the UK, particularly, it looks to me like hydrogen is a non-starter.
Logistics in the UK, as you might imagine, is significantly different from the way we move goods here. For one thing, England has roughly the same landmass as the state of Alabama, about 50,000 square miles, but 10 times the population density. That means shorter trips can satisfy the logistics needs of most of the UK population. Cebon sees batteries as the best strategy in the UK, and he thinks batteries are our best bet for local and short regional runs here. He says while hydrogen could meet some of the physical needs for long-haul sector, it's too inefficient to be economically viable.
First thing about hydrogen is that it is very inefficient. And I hear people say, oh, you engineers, you're always talking about efficiency. It's a geeky thing. There's much more involved here than efficiency. But actually, efficiency is a critical thing here. It really is. Because with efficiency comes the economics. So if you want to run a truck on hydrogen, you take, and let's say it's green hydrogen, so it's the stuff you've got a nice wind turbine or a solar farm or maybe a nuclear power station if you think that's suitable. You've got this renewable electricity. If you start off with an amount of renewable electricity, say 100 kilowatt hours of electricity, to turn it into hydrogen, first of all, you have to electrolyze water and pure water, and that's about 75% efficient. Now then that makes hydrogen, and you have to compress it, and you have to transport it. And then when you get to the other end, you decompress it, and you put it through a fuel cell. Now all of those steps have inefficiencies, and actually hydrogen is very difficult to compress and very difficult to transport. Particularly because it has such a low density. It's very lightweight, and it means it's hard to get a lot of hydrogen into a tank. The fuel cell is about 50% efficient. And that is a big problem. So 50% efficiency is a big challenge, because you take the 75 of the electrolysis and the 50 of the fuel cell and you multiply them together, you're at about 35%, 37.5% efficiency, right?
Yep.
Then you add in all those other inefficiencies due to compression and transport and so on, and you're down in the 25s. So this means you've thrown away, in this process, and of course you take the electricity and you put it into electric motor. So you've gone electricity to hydrogen, back to electricity again. In the process, that whole process is only 25% efficient. So you've thrown away 75% of the energy. It's just gone away as heat into the environment. And so of your 100 kilowatt hours, you've only got 25 left to drive your truck. Now, the problem is that you had to pay for the 100 to be generated. So you don't just pay for the 25, you have to pay for the 100. Because somebody's got to pay for that. Who's going to pay for it? Nobody's going to give it away free. So somebody's got to pay for the fact that they generated 100 kilowatt hours, but you've only got 25. What it means is that your 25 cost you about 4 times more than they would have otherwise.
That's an interesting way of looking at it.
So that's the problem. Now, if you compare that with the electric vehicle, with an electric vehicle, you take your 100 kilowatt hours, you transmit it by the grid, and you lose a little bit that way. You put it in and out of a battery, perhaps. Maybe that's 85% efficient. By the time you get through all of that, you're at about 70%. So on the one hand, you've ended up with 25% of the energy. On the other hand, you've ended up with about 70% of the energy, or 75%. So the ratio between those is 3. So what that means is that you need 3 times more electricity to start with if you're going to do a hydrogen vehicle than if you're going to do an electric vehicle. Now, that 3 times more means the energy for that hydrogen vehicle is going to cost you 3 times more than an electric vehicle. Right? That's just fact, because you've got to buy the electricity.
Yep.
So the arithmetic is that to power your hydrogen truck per mile will cost you 3 times more than it will cost you to power an electric vehicle.
The next significant barrier to fuel cell trucks is the capital cost. BEVs and FCEVs are fundamentally the same, but the fuel cell trucks cost a lot more. They both have electric motors, inverters, and yes, they both have batteries.
The difference between them is that the electric vehicle has a bigger battery, and the hydrogen vehicle, instead of having a bigger battery, because it does have a battery in a hydrogen vehicle, significant size of battery, instead of having a bigger battery, it has a hydrogen fuel tank. It has, or multiple hydrogen fuel tanks. It has a fuel cell and has a whole bunch of hydrogen delivery equipment. And that equipment is complex, delicate, expensive equipment. The fuel cell, for example, is full of platinum. The seals and the materials have to be good enough to stop hydrogen leaking through. That means you can't use ordinary, simple materials. You've got to use much more resistant materials.
We all know fuel cell trucks will be more expensive than battery trucks, but nobody's sure exactly how much more. They aren't yet manufactured at scale, which will bring down the cost somewhat. And at this point, much of the actual cost is hidden by subsidies. But last year, the Cambridge University Engineering Department put out tenders to buy a small fleet of BEV and FCV trucks for their field tests. That brought the actual costs into focus.
And to do that, the interesting thing is that we had to go to the OEMs and say, how much does it cost for a tractor unit, which we're going to need you to deliver by in the next year and a half? So it's forced the OEMs to actually give quotes for the price of vehicles. So the answer to this is that here a diesel-powered truck costs about 120, 150,000 pounds, which is more in dollars, but never mind. I'll talk in pounds. It's not that much more in dollars, actually, because the pound's in the toilet
right now,
to where it should be. But
yeah.
So but so say $150,000. Let's put it into dollars. So about $150,000 for a diesel truck. So I will convert from pounds directly into dollars 1-to-1.
Yeah,
the price that we've been quoted for battery electric vehicles from the likes of Scania and Volvo, about 250 to 300,000 for a 600 kilowatt hour battery. So that's something which is that's the biggest vehicles that the batteries that they're making at the moment, and that should just about get you around about 4 hours of driving on a full load of 44 tons, which is what we can carry here. So 150, roughly 250 or 300,000 for a battery electric truck. The hydrogen trucks, 600,000, double
the price.
So if you want to buy a hydrogen truck now, it will cost you double what the battery electric truck costs you. So the equation is pretty clear in economic terms. You've got a battery electric truck, and a hydrogen truck. The hydrogen truck costs you double in capital and 3 times in energy costs to run it.
It's an expensive proposition.
That is an expensive proposition. Are you going to buy it? Well, the answer is to whether you're going to buy it or not is you're not going to buy it if the electric vehicle will do the job for you. If the electric vehicle can do your logistics work, you'll buy that. You won't buy the hydrogen vehicle. So that's the situation in the UK.
The other little problem that's seldom spoken of is hydrogen's carbon footprint. Yeah, carbon footprint. You heard that right. About 96% of the hydrogen currently produced here in the U.S. comes from a process called steam methane reforming. That process is much less energy intensive and much less expensive than electrolyzing water. That's the process of separating hydrogen and oxygen from pure water. However, SMR produces enormous quantities of CO2, and that's the very same greenhouse gas that we're working so hard to reduce by decarbonizing transportation.
Well, so the problems with making hydrogen from natural gas are that it generates a lot of carbon dioxide, and that carbon dioxide ends up in the atmosphere.
Yeah, right. Like 10 to 1. I've
exactly
read.
Right. Yeah. Every kilogram of hydrogen you make, you get 10 kilograms of CO2.
Yeah, not a good trade-off.
Or more.
This fact is corroborated by author and chemical engineer Robert Rapier. He wrote an article for Forbes magazine in June of 2020 titled Estimating the Carbon Footprint of Hydrogen Production. We have a link to that story in the show notes below, by the way, and it's an interesting read. According to Rapier's story, the process of producing 1 kilogram of hydrogen from natural gas produces 9.3 kilograms of CO2. And for the record, that's the same amount of CO2 produced when a gallon of gasoline is burned. Hydrogen derived by steam methane reforming is often referred to as gray hydrogen. It's generally acknowledged that it's not the greenest way of producing this stuff, but through another process called carbon capture or carbon sequestration, some of the CO2 can be collected and stored, and some say taken out of the carbon intensity calculations for hydrogen production. This process yields what's called blue hydrogen. But like practically everything connected with hydrogen, producing blue hydrogen isn't as straightforward as it seems.
But then you get your methane to the hydrogen plant, and the way that you make hydrogen is you mix hot steam with the methane, with the natural gas, and hydrogen comes out one side and carbon dioxide comes out the other. And the idea is that you capture the carbon dioxide and you put it down a hole in the ground, and you've got this nice clean hydrogen.
Blue hydrogen.
There's a number of problems with that, and particularly the amount of carbon dioxide that you can capture is limited. It's very hard to capture all of it. And the actual plants that exist, for example, there's one called Quest in Canada. The Quest's plant emissions, capture rate is about 25% of the carbon that's emitted.
They're only capturing 25%?
They're only capturing 25%.
So now, 75% is still going. 7.5 kgs for every kilogram of hydrogen is still getting out.
That's right. Now, of course, everybody's got, the US government with the Inflation Reduction Act has brought in a bit of a a limit on that. They're saying instead of emitting, 75%, we only want you can get away with this if you only emit 30%.
Mm-hmm.
And it's theoretically possible to do that, to capture 70% of the carbon dioxide, but it's very difficult and it's never been done.
Expensive, I would imagine, too.
And it's expensive. And one of the reasons why it's never been done is because it's so expensive. Because why would you, right?
Well,
unless, of course, you had a big subsidy from the IRA.
Well, why is hydrogen so popular? Well, all the challenges you've just outlined should be fairly obvious. I'm not the brightest guy in the world, but I can sort of see where you're going. Why don't the hydrogen purveyors understand this? We still talk about the hydrogen economy like it's, like I said earlier, the fuel of the future. That's not jibing with what you're telling me.
Well, I have a pretty jaundiced view about this. I think they do understand. I think they do understand because the likes of Exxon and Shell and BP, they're full of smart engineers,
mm-hmm.
and I think they've done the calculations, and I think they know.
Okay,
and it's worse if they know and they're not telling us than if they don't know and they're not telling us.
Well,
right?
It's like smoking
if they
and
know
everything
and they're
else.
Not telling us.
Yeah.
So I think they know. I don't think it's rocket science. The factor of 3 is not rocket science. Anyone could work that out, and they've been able to work that out any time in the past, 50 years. It's not a big deal, that factor of 3. And the difficulty of compressing hydrogen has been known for 50 years too.
Mm-hmm.
So Shell, Exxon, they know. And so why are they pushing hydrogen? They're pushing hydrogen because it is a lifeline for the fossil fuel industry. And no more, no less. Actually, they know that green hydrogen that I've talked about can't work because the amount of electricity required is so massive.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at it, the amount of renewable energy requirement is just insane. So they know that can't work. So how else do you make hydrogen? Well, you make hydrogen from natural gas.
Based on what David Cebon has to say about hydrogen, it's difficult to reconcile what we hear from the industry at large. Hydrogen doesn't seem to be the silver bullet energy source many claim it will be. It may look like an alternative to diesel for long-haul fleets, but it seems to have many drawbacks. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to Heavy Duty Trucking's YouTube channel and give us a like. That helps other people to find us. You can check out our other social media channels too. We're on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And remember, there's lots of great written content about the trucking industry on our website, truckinginfo.com. I'm Jim Park. Thanks for watching.